Hey guys, and welcome back to part 3 of my how to build a minigun prop video series. The minigun that I'm working on is for my Terminator T600 cosplay. The T600 as seen on Terminator Salvation, one of my favorite Terminator films, as I've mentioned a couple times in this series, and this Terminator in particular is fantastic. In part 1, I worked on the barrels and how the barrels would attach to the body, and then the muzzle brake, which is what I'm calling this end here. And then part 2 is we finished the body, is what I call the body. So it's these three cylinders here. There's still some detail to be put on everything, to be completely honest with you. But I'm not quite sure how far I want to take that detail, so I'm not focusing on that in this video. You will see it in the finale though, so don't worry. Today's video, we're actually going to be focusing on building what I call the brace, or technically part of the brace, and I'll get to that in a second. The brace is the piece that's going to sit right here. And that's going to make the chain gun wieldable with a single arm. So that includes the trigger mechanism, we actually pull the trigger, and then the thing that my arm will rest on. And for the sake of this video, as I've mentioned in part 1, part of the reason I'm making this is actually to get it signed by a celebrity. His name is Matt Taylor. He's an actor from another great video, or a movie series, that I love, which is the Resident Evil. If you want to see a little bit more about that, part 4, I should be able to talk a little bit more about that, because hopefully I'll be able to film him signing the prop itself. But I'm actually, like I mentioned before, I'm not building the full brace technically, because as I mentioned, this is for a Terminator cosplay, and in particular it's a Terminator, one of the first attempts at Terminators trying to infiltrate the human resistance. And so he's actually wearing like human clothes, but because they're a failed attempt, he's shot to hell and like the clothes are all ripped up and everything. So to make this a bit easier to wield, I'm actually going to be building a Terminator forearm piece, which is a very iconic look, and actually gluing it directly to the chain gun, or the minigun, same thing, itself, so that it'll actually be more of a sleeve that I put on and hold, compared to a strap, the way that the Terminator actually holds it, which is he simply holds it and it's strapped to his arm. I'm going to make it look like that's the case, but actually it's going to be a full sleeve. And then I'll have, torn up clothing and everything like that that I thrift for that later on. Anyway, let's jump into the making of the video, because that's really the fun part, and that's really the thing you're here for as we work on the brace. Okay, so we are back with some candid commentary, because so far no one's told me to stop. So here we go. I'm here working on these arches. This is what's going to attach the brace, which is essentially just a rectangle made out of poster board and wrapped in foam, so it all looks the same once it's painted, to the actual main cylinder that is the body of the chain gun, which you can see here. I'm just kind of measuring out, trying to get things as straight and as level as possible. I think I did an okay job here, but it's really hard when it comes to cylinders and working on a prop this big. But just trying to measure twice, cut once, or measure twice, I guess glue once in this case. So I ended up making 3 arches total. I figured that was a good number, and to be honest, I actually just kind of liked the look of 3 arches. So once all the glue was ready, I tried to get this as level as possible, and I aimed it kind of where my sight line was, so I could try and get it as flat and as straight as possible, which is why it's out of the camera's frame here. Again, just kind of a byproduct of working on a prop this big. I did end up having to use the Dremel with a rougher, low grit sandpaper head, just to flatten out the top faces or the top edges of the arches. Again, just trying to get that, flat surface as flat as possible. Because ultimately, unless you're using a cutting tool, you're really going to be cutting at some sort of angle. So once all the arches were on, I figured out where the brace was going to sit, tried to center it on all 3 of the arches, which ended up working pretty well. The glue job, again, measured twice, glued once, and I think that really worked. So I'm just marking out here where on the bottom or the back side of the brace I need to apply the glue, because otherwise, I don't want to waste glue and apply glue everywhere. So once all that was taken care of, I applied the glue, and then once that was ready, I attached the brace to the chain gun. And as you can see here, the way that I made the arches allowed me to add an arm strap so that if I did end up using something different than the Terminator arm that I was originally planning on adding to this, I could strap it and then it's not entirely on my wrist. There's a bit of support kind of farther back, which worked quite well. Now, the next thing I'm going to work on is the trigger mechanism. I know in the beginning you did see that I completed it because the reality is I made the trigger mechanism first. But in the editing process for this video, I decided to just show you how I made the brace first, as I glue the brace down first and then the trigger mechanism. So I ended up trying to make some a bit of a slight curve to the trigger mechanism, but then also kind of keeping in mind that this is a Terminator, so comfort of grip isn't necessary. And ultimately it's actually not that uncomfortable holding it, even with a pretty rigid shape like this, the non-ergonomic shape. So as pretty much all the other patterns, I made the paper version first. I used a foam board core to bulk it out to make sure, just to keep it as light as possible. And then I would go and wrap everything with foam so that everything, once it was painted, had the same surface texture. And so it all kind of matched. Here I am making the base where the actual trigger mechanism is going to sit on to the actual chain gun body. Doing my best to make a equal rectangle or square shape. And then here I am just cutting it out of the foam board. Again, a lot of this process is the same over and over again because it really works, and I highly recommend if you're making big props or even big armor pieces that have geometric shapes in them as the core shape, use foam board because it's so light and it is structural, like it's pretty rigid, and then wrap it in foam instead of making it entirely out of foam because you're just going to save on so much weight, which means the entire thing is going to be much more comfortable. So you can see here I had to make three, just to get the thickness I wanted, I had to use three shapes, three versions of the grip to get that thickness that I wanted. This is just the easiest way for me to do that. And so yeah, just kind of moved on from there. This is again a method that I've used for a lot of different props. And with the foam board, thankfully I can also just use hot glue for a lot of the combinations. You do end up wanting to use hot glue instead of other glues just because the foam inside the board dissolves with any other glue. The nice thing is you do have that paper edge, so that you just have to be kind of smart and technical and tactical on how you use the foam. Here you can see that I wrapped it with foam. I didn't feel like filming it just because it was such a boring process. I did end up adding a little bit of a detail, which is these pads on the side, which I wanted to create this texture. Again, making it look like that Skynet took the chain gun. It was previously made for a human or had some sort of human attachment, or Skynet just had something that humans used and then welded it on. So that's that, and then a pretty big trigger mechanism, which I'm going to paint red later. It's a really great accent piece. I really, really like it. You'll see more about the painting in the finale in part 4. I'm now making the side pieces, so the entire trigger mechanism is going to be made up of 4 pieces. So the actual grip itself, and then 3 panels that are going to wrap around the cylinder at the body of the piece. Now, again, as I mentioned before, you do have to be tactical and just technical where you're applying EVA foam to. And so because I needed the foam to connect with the foam that the handle is going to be attached to on that base, I needed the foam on these side panels to extend farther out. And so that way the foam could attach to foam, and that the foam inside the foam board, man, I'm saying foam a lot. I hope this is making sense. Doesn't dissolve when I try and attach it, and it creates a secure bond. And it ended up doing that, so I added the cement glue there. I will then later on, you'll see, go and use hot glue to reinforce the seams, but also just between the the foam boards pieces, because I still want that connection point. I just can't use cement glue or super glue to do it, so hot glue is the go-to glue. In fact, in this step, I use a lot of hot glue just because it's so robust, it's thick, and when it comes to these kind of connection points, sometimes hot glue is just the better choice. Again, you do have to be smart as it is temperature affected, right? So you don't want the hot glue to melt and your entire thing to fall apart. So here I am creating the foam wrap that is going to wrap around the grip, because I glued the grip down to the base to make it more secure and more functional. I then had to create a way that EVA foam could wrap around the grip and cover the top of the base of the grip. So you can see here, I added a little notch and then very carefully kind of wrapped it around, and then the notch would meet on the other side of the grip, and that's where the hand is really gonna guard and cover that seam. So I actually didn't see the need to do any foam clay or any cover of that, because again, it's gonna be hidden for the most part. Here I am, I use super glue for this part instead of cement glue, and there's the hot glue to attach the side panels. And then you can see here that it's got that curved shape. I'm gonna have to bend this shape in a little bit more just so that it meets the cylinder even more so, but you know, that's a later step. I again use hot glue as a reinforcer here just to build that contact. And you can see I kind of jumped ahead because I wanted to see what it would look like, what a rivet would look like on these pieces, and I ended up it looked really, really good, which, you know, reinforced the idea for me that googly eye rivets was really the way to go. But that's going to be covered more in part 4 of this series, so definitely stay tuned for that. Now, even though this is the back of the grip, I still really wanted to make sure that this was covered in foam, as this could add as another contact point, further reinforcing the combination of this grip piece to the body of the chain gun. You can see that the brace, you can actually glue the grip to the base, or the brace, sorry, and which is why I added that back layer of the foam, even though my hand is really covering it and it's covered up by most of the chain gun. Just those small details can really help make sure that your props end up being, you know, as built well as could possibly be. Now in this stage, when I'm gluing the grip to the body of the chain gun, I use a mixture of cement glue, hot glue, and I think I do use some super glue. I'm not sure if I filmed that, but I think I did end up using some super glue here. Because this point is going to take up a lot of the weight of the chain gun, in fact, most of the weight of the chain gun when I'm holding it is going to come off of this grip, I wanted to make sure that it was reinforced as much as possible. So there you can see, I now attach the grip to the base, or the brace, sorry. It's confusing, and those words are coming together. And then once this was done, I made sure that was together, and you can see I'm bending those side panels one at a time, just to make sure that if I made a mistake on the first one, I could fix it before attaching the second one. I felt like it was safe to do so, so I pushed down the second panel, fully attaching the grip to the rest of the chain gun. You can see the shakes in my hands because I was so excited at this point because it was coming together so nicely. I'm super proud of this prop. It's definitely one of the best props I've ever made, and it's really going to come to that fact is going to come out in the paint job. And there we go. End of part 3 of how to make a minigun. Now, as I mentioned before, some of the video, just due to timing of when I needed this to get done, as well as, unfortunately, just some memory problems with using a phone instead of an actual camera, led to some of the things not being filmed. And so I do apologize about that. However, I hope I provided enough detail. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. So make sure that you tune in so you're able to catch all that final detail work and see how I finish this bad boy off, as well as hopefully get to see me showcase this to Matt Taylor, aka Nemesis from Resident Evil Apocalypse. One of the reasons this has had a bit of a time crunch on it. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next episode. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more cosplay content.